Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me today in the locker room. I'm Alan Locher. I do have a confession to make. I had not seen Little House on the Prairie before booking my next guest for today's show. My husband and a good friend grew up watching The Residents of Walnut Grove and had been telling me about their love of the prairie and Nellie for many, many years. I started to binge as many Nellie-themed episodes as I could watch and spent the last 2 weeks reading Alison Arngrim's New York Times bestselling memoir, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch: How I Survived Nellie Oleson and Learned to Love Being Hated, from cover to cover. I can assure all of you watching today that once this show is over, I will be spending a few months in Walnut Grove catching up on what I now know I certainly missed out on. My next guest made her television debut as Nellie Oleson on September 18th, 1974, and continues to entertain audiences around the world with her one-woman show, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch. Alison has spent time working on behalf of people living with HIV and AIDS and currently serves as the California Chair, National Spokesperson, and Founding Board Member on the National Advisory Board of the National Association to Protect Children, fighting to give children a legal and political voice in the war against child abuse. It is my pleasure to welcome to the locker room, Alison Arngrim.
Hi.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Thank you so much. Like I told you backstage and in that intro, I don't know what my childhood, how I missed out on that in my childhood. But
you were deprived. You were deprived.
I really was. It's funny because friends, my husband, one of my other husband's girlfriends, freaked out when she heard I was doing this. She still watches it religiously, right. And she's my age, and says that Little House life lessons still resonate today.
This is the thing what's so funny is people say, oh, I didn't watch it. And I'll say, go home and to talk to your friends. They'll like go to a friend and go, yeah, I met this in Alison Arngrim. Nellie, they go, Nellie Oleson, and they're like, wait, what is going on? What yeah, it's the reaction is unbelievable when you talk to someone who's into it and they're just like, oh, you're like, wait, what is this show about?
Literally, she was texting me before bed last night, so many things. One of the things she was texting, it was so funny. You've heard of the show Catfish?
Oh, it's one of the only reality shows I'll watch. I love Catfish.
Well, Little House had an episode in season 7 with Albert.
Yeah, the original Catfish man, 1888, man. He was catfishing. Catfishing.
Crazy.
Yeah, he was tall and athletic, and she was a ballerina, and she was in a wheelchair. It was like really crazy.
She was doing Swan Lake.
She was this little tiny girl who was in a wheelchair, and she was posing as this much older, beautiful teenage girl who was a ballerina, and he was posing as a much older, very handsome, athletic, macho teenage boy, and they were both lying their little faces off. It was adorable.
But it really was, though.
No, we did everything. We did everything. Remember, baby Jessica fell in the well. Baby Carrie did it first, fell in the mine shaft. Remember Balloon Boy, that guy, the father was, trying to get attention, and the kid was supposedly up in the Mylar balloon. Baby Carrie did it first. The Meet Me at the Fair episode where she ran away in a balloon. We did it all. Man. We had an episode called Plague, and we had an episode called Quarantine. We did it all.
Oh, you were quarantined before it was cool, I guess.
Yeah, right? If there is a major historical or media event, I am telling you, we have a Little House episode to go with it.
So fun. And one of the last episodes that I did watch, because there was a blog about the 10 best Nellie episodes where she gets like her, comeuppance, but being proposed by Percival. But it was also so funny to see how sort of anti-Semitic your mother was. Like when
my God, yeah, right? Well, anti-Semitism, another big one we did in Little House. Nellie was anti-Semitic originally. There's an episode when Albert is apprenticing to a woodworker who makes coffins and fine woodwork. And he's an elderly Jewish man, and Albert's learning all these great things. But Nellie and Willie come over and start mocking him for working for a Jewish man and saying things that Jews wear hats to cover their horns. I mean, it was like that level of really bad bad. So Nellie was quite the little anti-Semitic snot, and then of course winds up marrying a wonderful Jewish man, much to her mother's complete ashen horror. So yeah.
That reaction out of the window of her reaction was priceless.
Jewish. Wait till you see the episode where I have the babies, because of course I get pregnant, and then his family, Percival's family, come to town and reveal that he changed his name to Percival Dalton for business, and that his real name is Isaac Cohen, and his parents are super duper devout, like almost Orthodox, the Cohens, and they come to town and are like, well, the baby is your gracing.
Yeah, we're actually, I mean, my husband's seen, I think, most of them.
The twins,
he's enjoyed the entire ride of going through this with me, but we're going back to the beginning. We're going to go back and watch it in order.
But when you see the twins, because Mrs. Oleson, of course, has bought a christening gown, and her grandchild's, of course, going to be Christian, but the Cohens have arrived, and they've got the yarmulke for their baby grandson, who they expect will be named Benjamin, and they just get out of control. And of course, I conveniently have twins, a boy and a girl. So Benjamin and Jennifer, the Jew and the Gentile, yes.
One each.
Because it's Little House on the Prairie, and you can do that, because you can't do that in your life.
No, you can't. I know that you grew up in like an incredibly Hollywood family. Your dad, who was a manager, and you're a manager. Your mom was a voiceover artist, which I will get to, and your brother was a teen idol. Were you destined for this business from the moment you were born?
I think so, and it gets there. My aunt was a concert soprano. My uncle was a concert violinist with various symphonies, worked with Jascha Heifetz. So yeah, I mean, everyone was in show business. And growing up right smack in the middle of West Hollywood, and we knew all these actors, I literally, until I was like 7, thought everyone was on television, because they were, and people would come over for dinner, and I didn't know you were on Batman last week. Everyone was on TV. They were all guest starring and something. I mean, it was good in a way, because my sense of fantasy versus reality, there was a proper separation. You know, some children, it's very hard for them, but you know, someone would come to dinner and I'd seen them die on a cop show. They got killed on Dragnet last week, but there they were. So clearly, and mom wasn't really, you know, talking green ball of clay. So,
I'm going to get there.
That was so crazy.
That is too much.
I knew I was absolutely, everyone was an actor. Everyone was making TV shows or films or singing or dancing or something. And that's what people did. I didn't really know a lot of people who had jobs. I mean, I met doctors and dentists and teachers in my daily life, but like people we hung out with, I didn't really know anybody who had a job that was not in show business. When I was a little girl, I just kind of like, well, it was like, you know, learning to make shoes. If your family had a store, it's just the thing you did.
And did you ask to pursue it, or it was just sort of what your mom and dad sort of?
It was sort of both, because I mean, they were definitely taking me in auditions, and I had like, you know, Z cards and photos and 8x10s when I was a baby. And I got my first job. My SAG card says member since 1967. I'm 10,000 years old.
And then the president of SAG.
Hello, right, Melissa Gilbert. So yeah, so I started working 5-6 years old. And so I don't think, you know, I made a big conscious decision necessarily at 5, but I wanted to do it. And then when I got a little older, I was like, well, you know, where's my next job? Let's go,
right.
people.
And when that's all you see, it's sort of, you know, I want to do what they're doing.
Yeah, and I did. And I remember I wasn't mad about photo sessions and sometimes the endless auditions, because I did go to auditions like every day as a kid. Because I was a cute little blonde girl, so like, send her out. And I had a good agent, so I went out all the time. And sometimes the auditions were boring or weird, and the photo sessions always took too long. And I still, when I have to get pictures done, it's a trial. I have like 1 or 2 photographers. There's like a grand total of 4 photographers that I will sit still long enough to have my pictures done by.
You're one of the actors who finds it painful.
It's awful. I'm just like, oh, I gotta get there. But there's a couple of photographers I know who are brilliant, and they're really nice, and they make it it's like going to the painless dentist. They make it a pleasant experience. So I can stand.
The photos Harlan sent me were great. So you have great pictures.
Aren't those great, right? I have great pictures. They're all really good. And I
have great ones.
Had a good time, but generally it was like pulling teeth.
So, you know, congratulations on the incredible success of your memoir. Like I said, I couldn't put it down. Was there something that prompted you to write it at that time?
Yeah, I guess I've been writing it. I mean, sort of off and on for years. People would say, even when I was a kid, I mean, I hope you're writing this all down because you've got a book here. And I was doing a one-woman show. I'd been doing stand-up, but I started doing my one-woman show, Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, in New York in 2002. And so I'd started telling these real stories from my life instead of just regular stand-up. And I was telling more, they were all true stories. And so while I was doing it, I said, well, I should be writing down the long version of these true stories because, duh, this is such a book. And then I was doing this, and literally dropping things today. Hi, there I am. My glasses. A literary agent came to my show, the wonderful Kent D. Wolf, and he said, "Is there a book to go with the show?" And I was like, "There could be. How many chapters do I need?" And amazingly, when he said 4 chapters, I just happened to have right here. And so abracadabra, I had 4 chapters in an outline, and I got a book deal.
Wow, that's amazing.
But yeah, I've been writing it for a while. And
I've been posting as I was promoting our show today, and fans have, been commenting how they loved your book. I mean, the reaction must have been pretty amazing for you. I mean, just from fans of Little House, and then what your experiences in life were.
My favorite reviews are the ones when people say, I never watch a show, but your book, because it had this hot pink cover with that terrible Nellie face on it, and they said, I could see it from across the bookstore. I was like, what the heck is that? Or their friends gave it to them and said, somebody gave me this. And I was like, what in the world? And then they said, I couldn't stop reading. It's just like, this is so good. So that's the kicker. And then, of course, fans were just like, oh my God, this was great. All the behind the scenes stuff I wanted and more. I worked very hard. I did, as I say, I threw in everything and the kitchen sink. I wrote all this stuff. I wrote so much. They were like, no, that's too long. We actually only need 300 pages. You've written 8 million here. So then there was the editing process, working with the editor. That was a whole nightmare. And because that takes forever. She's like, okay, we're going to turn these 4 chapters into 1. Can we do that? And I'm like, well, I think so. So it was a lot of work. I didn't just bang that thing out, and I think it was worth it. Because the finished product is really good and people really like it. And they did the audiobook. I went to the studio later, recorded the audio.
So, yeah, somebody just commented on that too, that they were listening. Yeah.
Well, because people said, I read your book and I felt like you were sitting there talking to me. I could hear you. So when I did the audiobook, and then people got it and said, and this is exactly what it sounded like. It's like, perfect, nailed it.
I mean, the reaction had to have been incredible. So looking back on the childhood today, how would you describe it? There was Liberace, living at the Chateau Marmont, your brother and his drug and alcohol-induced parties, and, he was babysitting you. If somebody said to you, what was your... Oh, there's Liberace.
That's me and Liberace when I was 8. There you go.
Oh, my God, I love that.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So, it was so weird because, as you said, everything was going on. There was all this abuse and all of this sort of chaotic, not really good for a child environment craziness. And then at the same time, there was sort of this wonderfully anti-MAME loony stuff for a kid, like, let's go see Liberace now, get in the car. Okay. And all these wackadoo things, and going to parties with like Joanne Worley and like people, and just like this weird Hollywood life, some of which was very like ha 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 hilarious Eloise at the Plaza kind of like wackiness. And then at the same time, it's like, oh, we're really actually not paying attention to where our child is, like neglect. So a little combo with the two. Yeah.
I mean, crazy. And we talked a little about the story. Your brother's babysitting you, and he and his friends are baking a cake, and there's a bowl of frosting, which, like I said, I would have dove into the frosting.
Shockingly, I still like frosting today. One would think I would have quite the phobia of frosting after that, but oddly, I love a good bowl of frosting, preferably without massive quantities of LSD in it now. That was the crazy thing. So all these drug fiends are running loose in the house, and I'm like 8, and no one's paying any attention to anything. And so I go in the kitchen, and I, quite the cook, still quite the cook. Thanksgiving turkey. Telling you, and I would bake. And so I saw me a big bowl of frosting. I'm like, who baked a cake? Because my mother does not bake, and my father, but rarely a cake. And I'm like, well, that's wild. Let me check out this frosting. Oh, this is great. They did a little peppermint extract. It's very nice. So I'm eating the frosting because I'm 8 and it's like awesome. And then my brother and his friends walk into the kitchen and just like watching the color drain out of their face. Like, how much of that frosting did you eat? I don't know, about 4 spoonfuls. Put down the spoon.
Yeah, literally. Step away.
Frosting. Like, what's wrong with the frosting? Like, and I remember his friend, who was probably a nicer person with some shred of morals, was the one going, oh my God, we're going to die. We're going to go to jail. We're going to do jail. And I'm like, okay, clearly something's wrong. What's happening? And then that's when I explained, well, we're having a party and we baked a cake and we made frosting with a huge amount of liquid LSD in it. Pretty much you've just had enough frosting to, like, you know, get half of West Hollywood totally baked. I was like, oh, what do we do now? Well, you're coming to the party because we can't leave you here.
can't let you go to sleep. Can't leave you alone for a minute. Can't leave you
alone. So and can't really leave you here for like parents and police to find. So come in. So I'm like, that's probably bad, but really, what am I going to do? So yeah.
Seriously,
honestly, my brains were not completely scrambled. I don't know how. And I still like frosting, although it was a very, very weird evening, to put it mildly.
And now you probably ask, anything in that?
Yes, it has to. But you notice now, if I'm at a party, there's a drink, there's any kind of food, they're passing around the mushroom. I say, what's in this?
So true. So true. So for fans who might not know, you know, your mother was a voiceover artist in the late 50s and early 60s. She was, if I have it all right, the voice of Gumby, Casper the Friendly Ghost, Davy of Davy and Goliath, Underdog as well.
Underdog's girlfriend, Sweet Polly Purefoot.
I mean, that blew me away too. I mean, as a child, how does that, like, I can't imagine watching Casper or Gumby or any of those and oh my God, that's my mom.
Yeah, Saturday morning, and half the voices are my mother. And she did a bunch of other wacky stuff too. Like, most people don't remember, there was a cartoon called Mighty Mightor. Only like hardcore geeks from that era remember Mighty Mightor. But Mighty Mightor was a Conan the Barbarian caveman sort of superhero guy, and he had a sidekick, a little boy named Little Rock, and was that voice. But she was very big Casper, and Casper, when it was like the Hanna-Barbera Casper era, early 60s, there was Little Wendy the Witch and Spooky, the kind of bad little ghost, and Nightmare the horsey and all that stuff. So she's all of them too, because most cartoons at that time, and still some now, there's a guy and there's a girl. Yeah. That's it. 2 people in the studio, and every voice below middle C is him, and everybody else is. So like Davy and Goliath, it's just her and a guy. She's Davy. This guy is Goliath. This actor was it Dawes? I think it's Dawes. She worked with all the top people. They're really great guys, but she worked with the same people over and over again too. So she's working with this guy. So he's Davy's dad and the preacher and the policeman and the dog and the Goliath. And she's Davy and Davy's sister and Davy's mother and all of Davy's friends. So there's a scene in the house, and Davy's mom is there, and his sister Sally and Davy and 4 of his friends. So all 7 is my mother going blah, 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 to herself. It is 7-way station. Make you crazy. And they did a Casper album. There's a Casper album from the 60s. You can get it on iTunes. It's out there. It exists.
Oh my God, that's great.
A musical with a cast of thousands, and it's my mother and this one other guy. He's the ghostly trio, and she's like everybody, and she's Boo Boo the beautiful ghost.
I really need to find, you know, Underdog and Casper. I mean, I definitely watched, you know, those were my.
Where is my Underdog gone? And yeah, so she's everybody, and she was a guest Smurf. She wasn't Smurf regular, but she was a Smurf once. So it's like, it was very weird. My mother did these voices, and I did have, when she would walk me to school, tell the other children, and so they would say, sit true, she's yes, and they'd say, well, can you do Casper? So like 8 o'clock in the morning, she's going, hi, I'm Casper the Friendly Ghost. She's like, you owe me one.
Crazy. I mean, it's so crazy. I'm gonna have to take a little time before we get off later because so many people are commenting, and I'd love to read
Oh, they
some
must be
of.
going bananas. Hi,
Yeah,
everybody. Hi.
they are. They really are. You also talk about your childhood friend, one of your favorite grown-ups, who I had heard about, Christine Jorgensen, which was amazing. Again, like
And this
these
was a
names you have
huge deal at the time. I
at
mean,
the time.
nowadays, many people are trans and talk about it openly. And nowadays,
Mhm.
everyone would say, yes, I have friends who are trans. And trans men, trans women, and everybody knows who was trans, and it's spoke about openly, and people are much more open in dealing with this, and then coming out as being, and people now are even non-binary and totally cool with that. In 1968, I mean, people
Yeah,
were barely like admitting they were gay. It's like, which was still
they
illegal
were.
in
They
some places.
weren't. They
Right, they
weren't.
were. And we were in California, but like in the
Yeah.
rest of the country, you could get like arrested for being gay. You certainly didn't jump
Yeah.
up and announce you were trans. This was, people didn't do this. And here was this woman, Christine Jorgensen. And I've read her book, and it was the whole thing that George Jorgensen, and he realized something was wrong, said, I'm not George, something this, no. And it was finally an aunt who had the sense. His family was, the Jorgensen family were very forward thinking and supportive, but an aunt of Christine said, in Europe, they're doing very forward things with this. There's this doctor, you need to read this article. There's this guy in Denmark, and I was like, what? And next thing you know, got on the plane, and the aunt and the family hooked him up. Massive surgery, long time in the hospital. Remember, this is the 60s. This is 100 years ago. And Christine Jorgensen, and she was just going to go back to her life and be Christine and be totally normal, but like somebody tipped somebody off, and there were reporters at the airport. Her whole life was turned upside down. It was craziness. So she wrote a book and got a nightclub act and said, all right,
But you didn't know at the time you met Christine that she had been a man prior. Your mother and father, right?
Auntie Christine, this woman, because my parents had all these showbiz friends over, and she had a nightclub act, and my mother and Christine had the same publicist. Like everybody knows everybody, right? And
6 degrees.
Auntie Christine, this lovely woman, older lady, would come over, and she was really cool. I liked her a lot because, a lot of adults, especially, and as I said, I was a cute little blonde girl. They would talk down to kids, hello, dear, how are you? And you're like, oh, really, lady? But Christine was like, hi, so, what are you doing lately? Seen any good movies, read any good books? She talked to me like a normal person, and I could have a conversation with Christine. It's like, she's great. Who's this? And one day, she'd been over a few times, and obviously we'd hit it off. So my parents said, probably should tell her this. I'm totally ignoring it. Go away. Christine, they said, we need to tell you this because Auntie Christine is quite famous, and this could come up because it could be on the news. You could just randomly hear this, and it'd be really weird if you just heard this in the street or saw it on TV. We should really tell you what. And they said, well, we don't really know any other way to explain this, but just said, Auntie Christine used to be a man. And I was like, no, right. And then they started explaining the whole thing of what a trans, and like I said, we didn't even have the language back then.
No way.
And obviously Christine was Christine when she was being called George, but yeah. And they're trying to explain this. And I said, well, they can do that? And they're like, well, yeah. And I'm like, that's amazing. That's fantastic. So if tomorrow I decide that, and they're like, yeah, it's a bit more complicated than that.
That's what I love, because that is, when you sort of educate children, it's not a big deal.
I said, science is on the march, man. I was like, that's an incredible invention. I said, so this is a thing that some people say, oh, wow, I'm not a girl. I'm a boy. I'm not a boy. I'm a girl. And they can go to the doctor and and they're like, yeah. I'm like, well, that's fantastic. And I certainly didn't think anything less of Christine. It was like that. I was fascinated. And as I said in the book, it was kind of great because I was a kid and like nobody talked about this stuff. So I'm like staring at her.
Well, that's what I mean with the book. It's just name after name after name. So that's why,
right?
And I you know, I have definitely heard a lot about Christine, and
she was a
you know,
marvelous person. I later read that one of the reasons that she was friendly is that when she was in the hospital, because again, they had no language to talk about this then, people didn't know what they were doing. There wasn't a specific place like, well, where do we put her? There wasn't like a ward or a specific wing of the hospital for this particular thing. They and she had complications and had to stay in the hospital longer than she thought. So they put her in a ward where the chronically and terminally ill children were, who were staying for the long haulers and staying in the hospital. So she befriended them and would spend the afternoons talking with the kids. And so she developed a rapport with a lot of young kids. It was amazing.
Well, and you had your friendship with her.
Right, and that's where I think she became someone like talking.
And as George, she served in our military, correct? Right? She served
and she was very open about that. Where that, yes, okay, this was my other life when we thought I was George, but yeah, absolutely. Or what was it? You know, GI becomes blonde bombshell was, I believe, what the tabloids called this. Stuff.
I can only imagine what the tabloids did with that back then.
But so Christine was amazing, and B. Lilly, the British music hall performer, the Canadian actress B. Lilly. She was in Thoroughly Modern Millie, still one of my favorite movies. Thoroughly Modern Millie, which has Julie Andrews, Mary Tyler Moore, and Carol Channing, like the gay trifecta. It's a great movie. It's hysterical. And Beatrice Lilly is the lady who plays the villain who's chloroforming these girls and kidnapping them. And this is the plot of Thoroughly Modern Millie. They're being kid, and she was the villain and she was living at the Chateau Marmont when I was a child, and I met her in the hall, and she became my friend and came to my parties.
Crazy. Well, after your first movie, I think Throw Out the Anchor had come out. You talk about this girl, Jodie Foster, and if you were on the same audition as her, you know she got the part.
That damn Jodie Foster.
That damn Jodie Foster.
Damn Jodie Foster.
And then your dad, who was your manager at the time, sat you down shortly around that time, and about a week after that chat, the audition for Little House on the Prairie came up, right?
So crazy, because the truth is, as he said, many child actors, in fact, the majority of child actors, if they work when they're 6 and 7 and 8, whatever, that's it. It stops. They stop working in adolescence and don't work again, and sometimes never work again, or don't work again till adults. There's a lag, and I was having that lag. So I had worked heavily from 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'd done the movie when I was 10, which was not a big hit, but I did. And then my father sat me down. And
something else was waiting.
It was basically that I was washed up at 11, and telling me that my career was over. And then I got Little House right out. So when I talk about people say, "Is this your comeback?" I go, Little House was the comeback. I'm on like my 57th comeback.
Crazy. And you auditioned for Mary and Laura before they.
Yeah. Everyone, I think, auditioned for Laura. I call Laura, that was the search for Scarlett O'Hara for 8-year-olds. It was like everyone auditioned to be Laura Ingalls Wilder and then Mary. And I was like, what is going on? And then they did the pilot. So I forgot all about it. And then they're like, no, there's more people in the show. I'm like, how many people are in this thing? So I came back and auditioned. I had no idea what a Nellie Oleson was. I hadn't read the book.
What a Nellie Oleson was.
Not a clue. Hadn't read the books. Didn't know there was a villain. Didn't know there was somebody named Nellie Oleson who was evil and terrible and had ringlets. Not a clue. And I get there and I get these pages, and my father's sitting right there, and I'm like, Dad, this girl, no, it's not like a normal part. Like, what are you trying? I go, she's like a total bitch. And he's like, what? And then I start reading it for him. Of course, he goes into hysterics. He goes, you read it like that. You don't change anything. You don't do it. Don't even look at the pages. Don't rehearse it again. You read it like that. And I got the part. So I always said Jodie Foster had the flu. I don't know. No. You know what? Jodie Foster had opted to do, I think it was the TV version of like Paper Moon or Bad News Bears or something. She had opted to do that. And so she was busy. It was, because you go to an audition and Jodie Foster be, then you go, oh, we're all done. And then you couldn't be mad because she'd like knock it out of the park and be amazing. And then you go see the movie and go, well, that is pretty good. Yeah,
It is crazy. I mean, it's crazy that they even had you read for Laura and Mary. I mean, because you're just so perfect, as Nellie. I mean,
in retrospect, of course, right?
Yeah, of course. Does it surprise you today? I mean, literally just, the amount of people here who are just chatting up a storm, comparing their notes. I'm going to get to them later, but the attention, Little House lessons, like I said, what my friend said at the beginning, Little House lessons are timeless. And the fact that the show is still, every season is on, Amazon Prime. I mean, you can watch the entire run, and it's been seen, I think when you wrote the book, which is 10 years ago, and before streaming platforms, it was, in 140 countries. I mean, probably now through Amazon, it's even
all of them. Well, I did. So, it was 140 countries. It wasn't in Russia or China, and I've since gotten mail from Russia and China, so I got it now. It's all over the world, and then of course you have your Cozy TV, Me TV, Hallmark this, Hallmark that, PAX, blah blah blah, Inspiration TV. It's on all of those, and it's on Amazon, and it's on DVD, and then we had the good DVDs with the Blu-ray and everything, the high def. I've asked people, because I meet people literally from all over the world, Borneo and Bangladesh, Iraq, Iran, Israel, Argentina, and they're all saying the same thing. I grew up watching. I'm like, but what does this mean? Because it's the most American show in the world. It's the great American author Laura Ingalls Wilder, and it's all these blonde, blue-eyed white Americans in covered wagons on the. So I asked someone who's from Sri Lanka, what does this mean when you're living in Sri Lanka and you're. How does you relate to how does this have anything to do with your life? And he said, oh, no. The problems of the Ingalls, we can relate. They're poor. They live in a little house with a lot of children. And there's this rich family up the road who give them a hard time, and they can only shop at their store. This is how people are living all over the world. They say people aren't living, Dallas and Dynasty lifestyles. They're living Little House on the Prairie lifestyles. And they can relate. And they said, and then the problems every episode, it's life and death and love and romance and jealousy. They went, this is what we're doing. And they said, and this crosses all boundaries. And that's why all over the world, countries where you wouldn't think this show would have an appeal, and it's hugely popular.
And it must, I can't even imagine, you get this at 12. I mean, could you have imagined we're in 2020 and still, I mean, like, it really, like, even to me, I'm new to it, it's
it's insane. I would say we were in 1974. In 1974, there was no cable TV or DVD or even a VHS tape. So it's like, how would they watch it after it's on and then it goes away? And 70s were also, as I talked about in the book, the deruralization of TV. They were getting rid of Hee Haw and getting rid of all the Westerns and Beverly Hillbillies and Green Acres, which were all big hits, which is really weird that Hee Haw and Green Acres, Beverly Hillbillies were all big hits, but they were. They were getting rid of all these shows and trying, the cop shows. We're going into the era of Charlie's Angels and Love American Style and these modern and the Norman Lear shows. This was where we're at, the Partridge Family going to play rock and roll and live on a bus. So to have this show about the 1800s was like, no. And of course it was a smash. And we did not think it did not. Michael knew, but everybody else said, crazy, this isn't going to be a hit. And then around the third year, we realized we'd hit a nerve, we'd struck oil, and that something was happening. But we were quite surprised then. And as it went on and got to be like 7 years, we're like, how do we get off this train? We couldn't believe that it went on that long.
200 and something episodes.
Yeah, and then the thing ends in the 80s. We kind of, actors, we're like, okay, I'll do something else. People will stop talking about that. And then we're going, wow, we're all really typecast. And every audition you go to, they're like, oh, that's that Little House on the Prairie. And you're like, okay, soon this will stop. And I'm thinking, in a few years. No, then the DVDs and the VHS tapes came out. It started running, and then it got worse. And luckily there were things like TV Land's I Love the 70s, and I was able to go on shows like that. And I thought, this is getting nuttier. Maybe I should just cash in and get on the bandwagon and I'll join in the fun. And now more people watch it than ever. Okay, and we have new converts because people say, well, how old are these people who watch? They must be old. No, because new people keep signing up. You just joined the cult.
I did. I really did. I wasn't sure it really, for like you said, 1970, it really holds up, and it is sort of about those lessons, and it is about
eternal issues.
Yeah, and it's about family,
right.
or
people
wanting to be in love.
People who wish their parents were like the Ingalls. People who had terrible childhoods, and if only I could have had a family like the Ingalls. Everyone has a Mrs. Oleson at their job. Everyone has a Nellie at their school. It's like people are like, oh yeah, and so it pulls people in. But yeah, we had the people who watched it when it was on, who are like my age or a little older if they're adults, and if there were kids watching it, they're my age or a little younger. Then it's the after school reruns generation, kids who weren't even born when it was on, but they watched it after school. Then it became the VHS generation, the DVD generation. I've met people now who much younger than me who came in later and say, oh yes, I'm hooked. But my teenage daughter, I'm sure she's never seen it. And the teenager turns around and says, I watch it on my phone on YouTube. Everyone, we're on our 6th generation of viewers.
Crazy. And that Michael really did know, he knew. You actually said something about being in their living room and Nellie and Mrs. Everybody has a Nellie and everyone has a Mrs. Olson, and being in that school. The story about you and Mrs. Olson, the actress Catherine, right? Is it
Catherine McGregor? Yes.
One of the first personal appearances and you show up in your outfits.
And it was at it's Harvard Westlake. I think it was Westlake School for Girls at the time. It's Harvard Westlake, even if it was up there. And it was Easter fair, and they had a pond. I got all these pictures I just found the other day with all the baby ducks. The two of us posing with the baby ducks. And we thought, well, what the heck? It'll be fun. It's Easter. There's baby ducks. But some nut, because somebody knew somebody at the network. Oh, come in the costumes with the hair. And my father said, don't do it, don't go in the costume. But they were insisting. And he said, she's not Holly Hobby. She's not like a doll. She's a person. But no. Oh, we'll go with the costumes. It'll be great. Scared people to death. No one would come near us. Catherine was like, hello, little girl. This kid starts crying and screaming. She frightened a child. The child started crying, like 4 years old, and Catherine got really upset because she really didn't like making small children cry. She's like, I'm making children cry. What are we doing here? And it got worse, and nobody wanted her autograph. And finally,
I find it so funny. Because,
and then I walked away. It was a train wreck. And then I go to get a hot dog, and these two little girls come running up and kick me in the butt and knock me face down on the pavement. And I can't get up because at the petticoats, I'm like a turtle.
I've seen kids get upset, at Mickey Mouse just because the costume sort of scared them. But you two were mean, so like I can really.
I'm guessing, because when people take kids to Disneyland, don't they, when they see Captain Hook or Cruella de Vil, like flip out occasionally, or the evil queen? They must like.
So can you imagine it? Nellie Olson's,
Too real. It's too real, man.
There's another story. I mean, you and Melissa were good friends, and that's, I think, just surprising to people because they expect Nellie and her not to get along.
Oh, I was texting her because she's up in the Catskills and she's raising chickens, and I said, do not even go back to Manhattan. Go ahead, buy the cow, get the chickens, get a couple of goats. Just don't even go back into Manhattan. Just stay there.
No, she's out. I'm in New Jersey. But the story you tell of being in a store, the two of you were in a store and people came up to warn her that you were in the store.
She's in the other aisle. I came here with her. What is up with you? People. Okay, so we're at she had a grown-up slumber party. We were 40 something. And she throws a party, all these women in their 40s. And she had like lovely pajamas. You got a free pair of cute pajamas to wear and everything. We're like watching movies and making fondue and having a lovely time and chatting and cocktails and fondue and pajamas, like grown-up slumber party. And this woman who, she's like at a studio. She was in the industry. She was a producer. She's standing there and she says, it's so good to see you two getting along now. And Melissa and I go, did we not getting along? And Melissa goes, was there something in the tabloids? Did we have a fight? Is there some rumor I didn't hear about? What did we do? What? And we said, what are you talking about? And that's when she said, well, when you were younger. And it took us God, it must have taken us 5-10 minutes. We were so slow. And finally it sunk in and Melissa went, you mean on the show? And this was a grown person. And she thought we really hated each other because she'd watched the show. And Melissa's like, she was surprised that I was at Melissa's house. Like, what was I doing in her house at a party? And Melissa's like, it was a show. She's like, you're in the industry. Your husband's a producer. You work at Paramount. Well, how? What the? And like freaked that this woman, but she believed it. She believed it was real. Real, man.
It really is crazy. What do you think you learned most from the whole experience from Michael?
Mm. There's a great work ethic. A couple of my friends have talked about that. Child actor work ethic. Well, child actor work ethic goes one of two ways. You either are the laziest person in the entire universe, or like the hardest working person in show business. Children in show business, either it's like everything gets done for them by their parents and managers, and they have no idea where their money is, and they're just like waiting for someone to tell them what to do next. Where do I stand? Or they're because they started learning to work and be there on time and hit your mark and know your lines when they were babies. That kind of work ethic and discipline is lifelong. And Michael was big about the work ethic because we our episodes, we were shooting this whole hour-long thing in Panavision 35 millimeter, getting it done in a week and coming in ahead of schedule and under budget. So that was like top kids. So you couldn't really be fooling around. Although we did fool around, he was hilarious and was always joking and having us laugh. But we would shoot some insane number of scenes a day. We worked like fiends. And we were young kids, and we were expected to hold up our end of the bargain just as if we were grown-ups. We weren't, I talked about in the book that one of the ADs thought it would be nice to give the kids candy and gum at the end of the day. If they're all really well behaved, I'm going to hand out candy and gum. And they like that, and it'll be great, and it'll be, for the extras and stuff, a little, impetus to get them to behave. Michael said, no, you have to stop doing that immediately. I don't want you giving gum, candy. It's like, well, what are you talking about? They have a reward. It's their paycheck at the end of the week. And which sounds really harsh and horrible, but the guy said, look, they're working here. This is a job. They auditioned. They got hired. They're not dumb. They know they work here. We're not handing out gum and candy to the adults. And he said, they're not trained animals. They're not little dogs. I got a treat for you. He said, these are actors. They're professionals. They may be tiny little professionals, but they're professional actors, and this is their job. And they know this. And I don't want you condescending to them and treating them like they're animals. Either they do the work or they don't. I was, whoa!
Yeah, I mean, it's a great way to learn just about work, whether you stayed in the business or not. Work ethic is a great thing for all of us to have. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I thought was fascinating, because I just watched the reunion you all did on the Today Show, where Michael wanted everybody got to be home for dinner, basically.
Yeah, we didn't do any weird night shoots because we did a lot of day for night, because back then and the thing you just turned down the thing on the camera and it got dark. It's like the old days. But yeah, they didn't do that because he'd done Bonanza and they'd all worked. And that crew, the same crew, came over from Bonanza at Little House, so they knew how they'd worked together so much. It was like by the numbers. You could literally say, that shot, the one I like where we do the two shot, but not quite the two shot. Oh, yeah, number 47. He didn't have to explain what he was doing. He would figure out what shots he wanted the night before. So he would come in and go, they would set up and go, okay, we're going to do a master, and then we're going to do her close-up, and then we're going to do two shots. And he knew exactly. He wouldn't have to think, look, what are we doing next? And they all knew. And they would just go bang, 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 bang. And they knew how. They knew what they were doing. And they knew they could speak practically in code. So it went very quickly, and they all were older and had kids by then. He said, so what if we do this? We start really early in the morning. And we went in at 4 and 5. But then when we're done, we're done. We don't shoot all night. We don't do a 12-hour day. We crank this out at lightning speed, and 5, 6 o'clock tops, we all go home. We all go home to our families and eat dinner. And we did. And he said, well, we have kids on the show. The kids can only work so long. So 90% of the scenes, once the kids leave, we're kind of stuck. We can only shoot so much. So let's just do it.
Yeah, and you could tell that they were really professional. I mean, just the stuff that you did on a show in the 70s, really without special effects. I mean, the bunny episode, the camp out, all of them. And the bunny's your favorite, right?
It is going down it.
And it aired on my birthday in 1974.
Did it?
October 18th, 1974.
Well, it's how many people have a job where they can say, I rode down a hill in a wheelchair in my nightgown. It's not normal.
And that is a priceless moment.
And it's one of those where people say things like, it never gets old. It really doesn't. Every time, if I run the clip somewhere, people start laughing. I actually had run off a set of 8x10s that are just a close-up of me screaming as I go down the hill because it's that funny.
And you were in a cast, right? You were in a
Yeah,
cast.
I had a real broken arm. Yeah. Because I actually fell skip, so I had a real broken arm. So they're like, you'll be fine. I'm like, yeah, if I fall out of this, we really are gonna have a problem. This is actually dangerous. And I was in a nightgown, my underwear, and bedroom slippers. No seatbelt, no safety equipment, nothing.
And I mean, that really is sort of the epitome of Nellie, maybe. I mean, like what, by pretending to be paralyzed to her. I mean, it's okay maybe to Laura, but to your mother.
That's the episode, because it's not just Laura. I'm messing with the whole town.
Yeah, your mother and father, especially.
My parents, look at what Mr. Olson was crying and stopped because he thought I was. I'm like, Mr. Ingalls has to stop what he's doing and fix me up a wheelchair. Doc Baker thinks his career is over. He can't make me. I was screwing around with the whole town. This was not just messing with Laura's life. This is like serious stuff, and she's like 13. So yeah, I love that episode. It's really intense. Oh, I was just, special effects. This came up recently. Someone was asking about the episode with the bees.
Yes, that's what I just watched last night or the night before.
Special. Okay, we're talking. It's the 70s. There's no CGI.
That's what we were talking about.
They were like, okay, are we really going to subject these women to the bees? No, we are not, because there was a whole thing with the bee wrangle. This guy said, oh, we have these bees. They don't sting. They're trained. And Michael's like, really? And then, of course, the bee stings him. And Michael's like, yeah, no, take the bees. Go away. Take the bees. Leave. So they said, we'll fix it. So they did like stock shot from a nature program of swarming bees and like superimposed it. I mean, we are talking primitive special effects, and we're going, ow, 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 ow. And people watch this and go, you know, bee? I go, no. I am relieved to say I was not covered in bees, because I think I would have had a heart attack and died if I had to do that. I would not have been able to do it.
There was an episode, too, with Mary and Adam going off to catch a train, and the carriage tumbles down a hill with a pregnant lady in the thing. It was, like, I couldn't believe that, it looked, terrifying.
Fire and blood and death and disease and crashes and terrible.
The wolves.
Wolves. You have wolves in your barn. And we did things. I had a couple people on Facebook going, so they didn't hurt the animals, because they saw like horses falling down and animals getting shot, and they're like, please tell us they didn't kill the animals. They're like, no, actually, you're not allowed to kill the animals. It was after the year that they had that no animals were harmed in thing. But I said, no, they were trained. They had animals trained to fall down and play dead. It's yeah.
So funny. Judy just said Nellie was psychotic, but the show wouldn't have been the same without her.
Now, I was maybe somewhat histrionic personality disorder, but the psycho was Nancy. Nancy was crazy. Lovely girl, Alison Arngrim. And when I got to work with her in that one episode, we compared notes. She said, I didn't want to copy you, so I figured, you were going with kind of bitchy. I'd go with crazy. And I was like, nice choice.
Which one is she? I'm not sure if I saw that.
Oh, right. See, when you keep watching, eventually, after I grow up and I get married and I have the twins, we leave. Percival and I leave. We go to New York.
Oh, I love that you got married. I mean, he proposed and you got married in 3 seconds.
Yeah. And so eventually, and 7 years in, my contract's up. So I left. And so then Mrs. Olson is so despondent that she goes to the orphanage and adopts a little girl who is completely psychotic, who they keep like locked in the attic, and they said to send her away to a special school because she can't be adopted. She's like feral. And Mrs. Olson adopts her and proceeds to put her in my old clothes with full ringlets and do her up. And it's Nancy, and she's completely out of her mind. And she was great, fabulous.
Love that.
And people hate her.
I love that Mrs. Olson got a payback to have another child,
Yes. But she kind of does it on purpose. In fact, it's really twisted when the little girl won't come out of the room at the orphanage. She's like, I want that one. And they're like, oh, man. And she goes to this girl's room, and she smashed everything. She's locked herself in the room. She won't come out. She won't eat. And Mrs. Olson sits out there with the tray and says, I used to have a little girl, and goes off into this really weird psychological trip about how, I wanted her, I was spoiled as a child, and I spoiled her. And I said people were just jealous, but it's not true. They didn't like her because I had spoiled her. And she confesses to everything, confesses the whole thing, and then says, and if you come out of that room, I'll spoil you too. You'll have everything, and starts like telling her and the door slowly opens. It's like, it's like the happiest thing in the world. And so, yeah, so Mrs. Olson confesses to the whole thing that she knew what she was doing, that Nellie was awful and it was her fault, and then tells this girl, I'll do the exact same thing with you. And the girl is a total sociopath. So she's like, great.
I'm really looking forward to going back and the whole thing, because it some of it's just really moving, some of it's funny. I mean, it's just you sort of.
And if you haven't, you do have to watch both the anthrax episode and the typhus episode, Quarantine and Plague. You have to. I mean, under the circumstances, you must watch Quarantine and Plague.
I promise I will.
This is all very familiar.
So, I'd like to thank you personally for all you've done for people living with HIV and AIDS, as well as providing AIDS education to people over the years. I don't know if all the fans know, but Steve Tracy, who played Nellie's Percival, passed away due to complications from HIV and AIDS in 1986. Can you talk about your friendship with Steve and what you learned from watching him?
Yeah, when you marry someone on TV, you don't get to pick them, and often it's not a good thing because you have no idea. And you're a teenage girl; it's like an arranged marriage. It's like, oh, here's the actor who you're now married to. I love you. What? Oh, it's a little strange. But he was so nice. I really got lucky. I got a nice, kind person who used breath spray before kissing scenes, and was a wonderful, funny actor, and as I say, a generous actor. He'd studied with Lembeck, so he was very good with improv and comedy. He was really a cool guy, and we became great friends. So we hit it off, and we were like hanging out and go to parties and go to concerts together. And then he got sick, and he initially tried not to tell anyone. Then he said he had cancer, and then it went public. He said, "Okay, I'm going on TV, and I'm telling everyone I had AIDS." And we were all devastated. I was just devastated because this was '86. I mean, there was nothing. I mean, we barely had even AZT. We had like nothing. And he was on a bunch of experimental drugs, and that was really amazing because I said, well, are they going to work? He said, oh, no, it's much too late for me. I'm just doing the experiment because they might be able to save someone after I'm gone. I was like, okay. That's the kind of person he was. So he was very brave, and he did live a lot longer than they thought he was going to. Back then, people were dying in weeks and months. And he went on for a couple of years. So that was, nowadays, we have all these wonderful drugs and people stay alive for a very, very long time. No, back then, if you lived 9 months, it was a big deal. So he got that, yeah.
And he had a family who let him come home to die with them, right?
Totally opposite of everyone else was doing. His mom and his sister were on that first plane out, and they took care of him. They made sure he had everything. They went back and forth. And then when he got really, really, really sick, they came and they took him right back home to Tampa, Florida, and they were with him to the last minute. Stood by.
That's a good family.
Yeah. His mom and his sister are really cool people.
And so, I would say that's the impetus for your involvement in all of that. Talk about that.
It was so many people I knew, because growing up in Hollywood, that so many people were getting sick. And early on, they didn't even tell you what was happening. People just disappeared. People just got on a plane and went home. You'd say, he went home. Went home? He doesn't even like his parents. What do you mean he went home, sold everything in his apartment? People were just going. And then you'd hear that they died, and you didn't know what happened. And then AIDS, people started talking about it, and it was terrifying. It was like a horror movie. And then Steve, then here's my friend who's much closer to my age, who's my friend. And that was just heartbreaking. So I said, what do I do? What do you need? And he's like, well, I'm good. I got my mother and my sister, my friends are standing by me. And I've signed up for all the programs, and I have like insurance. So it's like, but other people didn't. So I volunteered at AIDS Project Los Angeles to help all the people who didn't have moms and sisters and health insurance from the Screen Actors Guild and all of these lovely things who really, really needed help. And so I was able to do that. And I was able to educate people, because talking about HIV and everything from condoms to transmission to disease, people were terrified. But for some reason, the lady from Little House on the Prairie is going to come talk to us. Somehow it was okay. I could come and talk to them about AIDS, but they wouldn't with somebody else. So it was very crazy. But I went, all right, then, I guess. But so I did the hotline, all this stuff. And I went all over the country. Talking to different groups and trying to help people and raising money for I get a call and they'd say, well, we're in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and we have a hospice and an AIDS organization. And, Liz Taylor's not really going to come out and do a fundraiser for us in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So they had me. I would go to all of these places and raise money.
Well, that's kudos, you know. I mean, can't even imagine watching somebody so close. But in some way, did Steve play a small role in you meeting your husband?
That's what's so crazy is that I signed up for H Parts of Los Angeles. You know, Steve was a client there, and he said, "Yeah, they're pretty good." And I went and I signed up for everything. And one of the things they had that I really liked was the Southern California AIDS Hotline, because they had this really intensive training where you learned all about the disease and about retroviruses and about infection, CD4 receptors and T cells and B cells and all the different drugs. And so I signed up for that, and the hotline was run by a guy named Bob Schoonover, who's director of Hotline, and we became very good friends. And did you ever see the movie When Harry Met Sally?
Mm-hmm.
So he had a girlfriend, I was married, and we became friends. And this goes on for 7 years. I get married and divorced. He breaks up with a girlfriend. It's totally like When Harry Met. 7 years we don't go on a date. We're just friends. We keep crossing paths. And finally, 7 years in, I said, well, you wouldn't want to go out with me, would you? And that, well, we just celebrated our 27th wedding anniversary last year.
Wow, happy anniversary.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
November 6th. Right?
Crazy. And I love you both wore tuxedos.
We did. We were matching. Well, we were trying to find like, what are we gonna wear? And I said, well, okay, look, it's the second wedding, so I'm not doing the dress thing. I did the thing with the pumps dyed to match and the veil. Not doing that again. And the bridesmaids with the thing in the dress. No. And I said, I don't know what I'm gonna wear. Maybe a nice, dress suit or something. He said, I'm wearing a tuxedo. I said, yes, but our wedding is informal daytime in a garden. You don't really wear tux or tails with that, because then you would have a dress with a train and a church. I said, it's a daytime and called like semi-casual. He said, it's my wedding. I'm only getting married once, and I'm wearing a tuxedo.
Okay. We'll do it your way.
I said, what the hell am I wearing then? He says, why not wear a tuxedo? You look great in a tuxedo. And I'm like, well, you have a point. Next thing, boom, off we go, matching tuxedos. And then I said, well, what do we do? Like shoes? And he said, well, we could go barefoot. He said, let's go barefoot. We're in the garden. I said, well, we have to get pedicures. I said, well, get a nice French tip manicure. Black.
Yeah.
I said, what do I do with my toes? And he says, well, paint them black.
Yeah.
I said, okay, you're completely insane. Black toenails. And that's when he said, I will if you will. I'm like, oh, here we go. And then it just turned into this fantastically, wonderfully wacko thing with magicians. And yeah, it was great.
And I love, I mean, in some ways, your on-screen husband had a small role,
He did, yeah. And that's the thing. He was a great guy. And even Bob said, yeah, well, things just happen and we wouldn't have met.
Happened for a reason. You talk about in the book about the incest and abuse you experienced as a child, and today, like I said earlier, you serve as the California chair, national spokesperson, and founding for the National Advisory Board of the National Association to Protect Children, fighting to give them a legal and political voice in the war. When did you start? Because I don't think you always spoke about the abuse. Was it when you started to work with Protect?
I had talked about it in therapy in my 20s, but then thought to anyone else. And then I had finally talked to friends, family, and I told them, hey, guys, you kind of screwed up this. You left me alone with the wrong person. Oops, yikes. Yeah. So that was weird. And then I had a lot of therapy, but I didn't go public. Some people went public, and I went, well, I'm not sure what I would get out of, or anyone get out of the public. Why? But then when Protect came to me and said, well, here's what we're doing. And I went, really? And I really like what they were doing. And they said, we'd like to have you on the board, blah, blah, blah. And they didn't know. And then it's like, well, we hate to ask, but I'm like, yes. Or as I told the poor guy, the executive director, I said, I'm not just president of the Hair Club for Men, I'm also a member. He said, well, do you want to go public? You don't have to. And I said, well, this is the kind, you do this kind of thing just like when people worked in AIDS, when celebrities worked in AIDS, they'd say, well, do you have HIV? Do you have AIDS? Are you HIV positive? Are you gay? Those questions immediately come up. You were going to have to answer them, which is why a lot of celebrities didn't want to get involved in AIDS, because they were HIV positive and they didn't want to go public. I said, you do this, they're going to say, were you abused? Duh, I'm going to answer. So I wound up really going public on the Senate floor in Sacramento in order to get a bill passed. But it worked. It worked. I wound up on Larry King Live talking about the law, and everybody went and called their senator in Sacramento, and that was the end of that. So it worked. I did it for a reason. I was like, fine, I will throw myself, sacrifice myself here and do this. And it worked. It worked. And I got good results. I know many people have gone public and it's been really awful for them. It wasn't. I had a very good support system. I had people around me. It wasn't like my husband or my best friend didn't know until that. I mean, people knew. And I had, lawyers and therapists and a partridge in a pear tree and a publicist. So I was protected. I would advise anyone who's planning on going public about their abuse to make sure you have like a shrink and a lawyer and a publicist sitting with you in the room when you did that. So I was in a really good place to do it, and it worked out really well. And I'm now president of the board of directors. I got promoted. I'm president of the board of directors, and we're doing.
But I mean, you must
stuff.
Right. That's what I mean. Like, you didn't just share that painful stuff for sharing it. You by sharing it, you have helped a lot of children around the U.S.
The response was huge. The number of people who then sort of came out to their friends and families who said, wow, I've never told anyone this before, but now that he's talked, by the way, and that was just the number of people said they were watching CNN broadcast with friends or someone and watched it. And then the first commercial break, their friend turned around and said, well, I wasn't going to tell you this, but I was like, oh, it was like, whoa, but it really had an impact, and it had an impact politically, and it really did the job. Now, we're doing a bunch of new stuff. We're doing so much stuff. One of the things we're launching really is so many kids who are in foster care and often are there because they've been abused. When they turn 18, what happens? Some foster families adopt them, keep them around as their own and get them to school, and some do not. A huge number of kids, when they age out of foster care, don't go to college, don't have a job, and are just kind of like, well, we're done now, and hit the bricks. And their rate of homelessness is really through the roof. So we're putting together a program to create housing for aged out foster kids, and a whole program where they'll have access to services. They need psychological services, job counseling, educational counseling, so that they will have a life. That, because talk about insult to injury. You get pulled out of one place. It's like, okay, we're going to get you out of there. Yay, good. And you're going to stay with these people. And then you turn 18, they go, well, thanks for playing. Why would you do that to someone? But that is the reality for a lot of people. And that is actually our next little mission that we're going to see if we can't tidy that up.
And that's through protect.org.
Protect.org. Yep.
Great. I don't know do you have a little extra time? Because we said an hour?
Yeah, I think so. Yes, I have a couple more minutes.
Okay, great. You tell the story of going to Paris for the first time, which happens to be with, I think I know Tom DiLorenzo from the daytime world.
Everybody knows Tom DiLorenzo.
But you had never been to Paris before, and then to experience Nellie, in that, across the globe. What was it?
Well, it was mind-blowing. As Tom even said, back in LA, you're a reasonably famous ex-child star. Here, you're apparently Madonna. What is going on? They chased the limo. The car had to go around the hotel and lose people and come back again, because it was like, Hard Day's Night or something with people attacking the car. It's like, hell is going on? Yeah, it was really weird. I'd heard that people in France liked the show. I'd gotten fan mail from them, but I had no idea to what degree until I got there. And I come out to go on this talk show, and I had the thing in my ear. I didn't speak French yet. At the time, je ne parle pas français, mais maintenant je parle français. J'ai fait un spectacle en français. J'ai tourné un film en français. So yeah, it's really. But now I think I study. I take a little French. But at the time, I was like, what? I had no idea what was happening. And I get on the show. I come out on the show, and the studio audience and the other guests start going, la, 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 la. They start singing. There's no words. And they're singing the theme song, which does not have words, but this does not stop them. And it's like, okay. And then indeed, I go out in the streets, and people are just bonkers. I've told people, I said, if you're out in the street in a park with 3 or more French people and you pass a meadow of flowers, one of them will scream, I am baby Carrie, and run and fall down. They are obsessed. And that's when I found out, I was like, oh, right. They started running it relatively early, not that long after the US, very early, one of the first countries. And they ran it at noon when French people go home for lunch. And they had 2 channels at the time, 3. So what happened? The entire country
was watching
and watched House on the Prairie every single day for the entire
And
last.
isn't it's so interesting because you would have never known if you didn't really get your butt over there.
I didn't realize that it was part of the fabric of their culture. It is in there. Okay, there's a TV commercial on French TV for a bank, and the commercial is this family all dressed up like the Ingalls Little House on the Prairie in a covered wagon with the bank manager in modern dress driving across the prairie talking about their home loan. And they say, and where is it? He goes, oh, it's over there. There, the little house on the prairie. And they go running across the field. And this is a television commercial. Everybody goes, ah, ha, 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 ha. They all know what it means. There's running jokes. Every sketch comedy show, every comedy film has some reference or joke about Little House on the Prairie in it in France. Every. And I'm like, look, who knew? So I went back. And now I do now, I mean, I was there in January and February, and I was supposed to be there in September and October, touring with the whole French comedy review.
But you're doing your one-woman show, The Confessions of a Prairie Bitch, but you started that at Fez in New York, which I love.
Yes, Club Fez was the first one. Yes,
which is so great. But it was supposed to be your normal comedy stuff was like 15 minutes, and they wanted an hour and a half.
Right. I mean, okay, LA comics, anyone can tell you a comic in LA, 20 minutes is a long time. Oh, I'm headlining. Okay, I'll do 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Like most people like, well, how long do I have? 10. They don't let you do that long at comedy clubs. And in LA, people have 10 minutes. They have 20 minutes. It's a big deal. And I worked I wouldn't say G-rated, double entendres, whatever. But I wasn't working low. I was really relatively clean. And they said, no, this is New York. And it's the same, Joan Rivers is there Friday, Saturday, and you're there like a Thursday, and it's Joan's crowd. And she swears like mad. So you need to do an hour and a half, and you really need to swear really a lot more because it's New York, and they won't understand you unless you're like saying a lot of F-bombs. So I was like, okay. And so next thing I know, I'm doing an hour and a half and swearing my face off. It was hilarious.
And it was a huge hit. And now you're doing it everywhere.
And then I wound up going all over the country. It turned into a thing. I got the book deal. The thing happened. And then my French buddy, Patrick, said, we could do adaptation. We have to change the whole thing because some jokes, they don't translate. Right. And next thing I know, we're doing a whole French show. And then he wrote like another one, Le Mal au Trésor de Nellie Oleson. He's working on a third one.
It's really smart of you to learn some French for since you're traveling so much for it.
Oh, I went back to school. I learned French. In fact, I just signed up for another class. I'd like to. Now we have the online ones. It's great. Don't even have to leave the house. But yeah, I like studying languages. I'm just a nut.
Yeah, before Little House, you hadn't read the books, but during this pandemic, you started reading them to fans on Facebook, right?
Yeah.
Had you read them before you started doing the Facebook Live stuff?
When I got the show, because we all were kind of like, oh, the book, Charlotte Stewart is like the funniest one because she's like, she had no idea. And she found a copy of one of the books at a garage sale, but it was like The Long Winter by the Shores of Silver Lake. She said she opened it up, and in the first chapter, Mary goes blind and the dog dies. And she's like, I don't know, why am I doing this?
Why am I reading this?
This is terrible. When I got the show, I went and got the books, and I immediately read On the Banks of Plum Creek, which is like the fourth book, but it's the one the show really takes from because it's got a teacher and a church and a mill and Nellie Oleson and all that. So I went, okay. And then I started reading. I read A Little House in the Big Woods, and I'd read them. And at one point, I read them all. And you tend to go back. I mean, I'd probably read On the Banks of Plum Creek a couple of times in Big Woods. I don't remember like when I'd read The Long Winter last. And I remember reading Little Town on the Prairie a lot because it had Nellie in it. But like, I don't know if I finished By the Shores of Silver Lake. I read some of the other books. But I never read them in order, like sat down and read Little House in the Big Woods. Okay, now, Farmer Boy, Little House in the Prairie, Farmer Boy. But I never sat there and read them in order and watched it develop. But that'll be a fun exercise. And because everything was canceled, and I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. And my husband said, well, you'll think of something. I'll read the books. Then I'll read them online. Everybody else is home. We'll read them together.
Smart.
They went bananas. People loved. I had no idea how much they love it. I just thought, well, I'm at home. I got nothing to do. I'll read the books, and maybe other people will enjoy this.
Everybody watching, go to Alison's Facebook page, which I have listed here. You can every Tuesday, right?
No, it's every day at 1:30.
Oh, every day at
I'll be
1:30.
I'll be running a little late today because I'm here right now and I have to rearrange the furniture. But I have to rearrange the furniture to my show. But yeah, Tuesday I have my show where I interview people like this, and I've got Hank. I have the guy from Car 54, Hank. There, Garrett from Car 54. Where are you? I do every day at 1:30 or thereabouts. If I'm late, I go, guys, I'm running late. I got through all 9 Little House books, and then I started reading Rosa's books. I started reading historical books about Laura, and I'm currently reading Pioneer Girl, the annotated autobiography, which is what Laura wrote first, and she didn't sell it. She didn't get a book deal, so she wrote the Little House books instead.
And when were these actually written?
The 1930s. And see, here's the kicker. It's like, okay, so in the 1800s, and those of us who hadn't studied this don't realize there were multiple Great Depressions in the 18th. There was the Panic of 1820 and the Recession of 1872. And several times in the 1800s there were some major financial crises. So in the 1870s, where the primary part was some of the Ingles, things were really hard. That's why they kept moving all the time. It wasn't like just wanderlust. It was like they ran out of money and had to leave town. And this was a thing. In the 1870s, times were very, very hard. In the long winter, people did starve and freeze to death and drag. So then she writes about this in the 1930s at the height of the Great Depression. And Harper Brothers, that became HarperCollins, they were wondering how they were going to get through the Depression. Now they're going to not go broke. And children's literature was just starting to become a thing. They'd just opened a children's department. Boom! Suddenly they have Little House books. It paid the rent. She saved publishing the entire industry and HarperCollins with these books. It was huge. And they broke up because now it was a depression, and they were reading about people being poor in the 1800s and going, oh wow, I can get into this. And in the 1930s, we don't think of that as modern, but things were becoming very modern. People were starting to get refrigerators. Canned food was all the rage. There was starting to be frozen food. And a lot of people said, wow, I remember 5 minutes ago, I was growing up on a farm and we're growing all our own food and raising our chickens. And now I'm going to the store and living in the city and going to a supermarket. And it was a big shift. So here were books about baking your own bread and raising the chickens, and people loved it. So then fast forward to 1974. Oh, right. Remember gas rationing, whip inflation now? We were all broke. You could only buy meat every other day at the supermarket. There was no meat. And the early 70s, we had a giant recession and people lost their jobs and there was no money and there was no gas and no meat. It was horrible. And Michael Landon put out a show about a family basically starving to death based on a family living through the recession of the 1870s from books that were written at the height of the Great Depression, and the show aired during the Great Recession of the 70s. And boom.
He's a smart man, that Mr. Landon.
And so hence the giant hit. And now here we are. Things are going
years later.
Here we are where things are going, shall we say, less than fabulously. A few things might have kind of gone wrong. And people are having trouble, to put it mildly. Mm-hmm. And what are people doing? They're watching Little House on the Prairie and they're reading the books.
Yeah. Well, good for you. I love that you're doing that. So I've started to ask people, is there anything you've learned about yourself during quarantine that you hadn't already known?
Well, yeah. I mean, I kind of knew that I was good at adapting and learning new things. I think in fact, the lovely Irish people, I was supposed to do a lecture in Ireland for the Women's Inspire Network business conference. That got canceled. Then they said, no, we're doing it online. So I did the whole thing in my living room, as I do everything now. And my thing was reinventing yourself in the midst of a crisis. So I kind of know about this.
I mean, this is what I did.
Right. It's okay. Up until March of this year, I had done one Facebook Live, and that's only because the chick who played Baby Grace on the show showed me. And I had never done a Zoom call. I didn't know what a Zoom call was. None of this stuff, StreamYard, all this. And I had some bonnets laying around because I was going to take them to one of the autograph shows. I had a store online, but I sold an occasional book, nothing. And and the next thing I know, I'm selling bonnets and tin cups and books. I'm doing StreamYard, BeLive, Facebook, Zoom, and then I'm doing my stand-up show live pay-per-view on stageit.com, and then I'm doing like my lecture for the women's conference in Ireland out of my living room. And I'm like, what is happening? Yeah,
that's
it's
adapting.
crazy.
That's adapting.
Yeah, I'm now queen of the internet, and I'm like, how do what the heck? I have look at my lighting, Julie. My lighting.
Your lighting looks
I have all this. My living room looks like a television studio crossed with an Amazon fulfillment center. It's all boxes of merchandise, backdrops, lighting rigs. It's like ridiculous, but that's what we're doing.
And we're going to be doing it for a little while.
Coming
A little longer. Well, this has been amazing. I'm going to look at the side here and just read a couple things for the fans. Please. Nancy says, as a school teacher, I understood Nellie. The poor dear just needed to get rid of those curls.
She is correct, because I got the curls and then they got me a wig, and it was the most uncomfortable thing in the world with a giant metal comb right here, and it hurt like all get out. It was. The wig hurt. That's what I said.
Nancy says, I watched the show so much, I feel a member of the family, and you had to love Percival.
See?
People were asking, and I think you wrote in the book, or do you still keep in touch with Melissa's brother?
I have not heard from Jonathan. I did write to him, like after the book came out, I actually wrote to him, and he did write back, so I got to hear from him that one time. He's done this ever since, God, I guess like right after college. He just kind of went, oh, bye y'all, and took off, went all over the world. Very
he really didn't want to act. He just did.
He was like, I am along for the ride and I am done now. And he just took off and did whatever the heck he wanted. And he still pops in. It's like he sort of pops in once a year, every 2 years. He will pop in and check in with Melissa, and she'll say, oh, I heard from him again. We'll go, oh, great, what's he doing? But like, that's it. He's like, no, he's not. Sorry, guys, he's not coming to a reunion. He is not doing any showbiz thing. He ain't coming on Facebook. It's like, just like, hi, okay, you good? You good? Okay, he's good. Okay. That's
well, as much as my husband watched, he didn't realize that it was Melissa's brother until I read the book. So much of reading the book was great, because as I was watching some of the episodes, you were talking about them in the book. So I was, there was a lot of information just about that.
Everybody was related to everybody. You had Matt Laberto and Pat Laberto. And then you had Kim Richards and Kyle Richards, Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Yeah.
And then you had the Gilberts. And then you had all the twins. You had the baby Carrie twins, the baby Grace twins, the baby Rose twins, the Benny and Jenny twins. And then you had Rodimus Parra playing John Jr., who had been Grasshopper on Kung Fu. And then his mom was an actress, and she was on like 2 episodes. So, and then Michael Landon's daughter, Leslie Landon, was in several episodes. She was Etta Plum.
Oh, that's so great.
Everybody's related.
GT Lem, one of the fans, said, please tell Alison how so many people around the world are grateful and appreciative of you being one of the first advocates for people living with HIV and equality for the gay community. So again, so awesome. Totally didn't recognize you, only your mouth when you talk. So cool. I watched the series like 5 times, and you are such an amazing actress. So naturally chatty and funny. Just all love to you. And we both were talking about Jeffrey, who told me he was watching. So Jeffrey, hello, Jeffrey.
We were just Facebooking, like was that early this morning? Yes, it was early. Okay, last night. What time is it?
Exactly.
But yes, Jeffrey and I were on Facebook, and he's like, "You're not talking to my friend." Oh my God, yes, I'm doing. Okay, yeah.
Love it, Alison.
I met him through APLA and have known him forever. We met at a summer party. I had the comedy stage, and he had the country western dance area.
Oh, nice. I've never met him. I just through hosting my show, he's done this.
Oh, he's a doll. You'll love him.
Yeah. There he says, "Miss you, Alison. Love to Bob." Thank you so much for doing this, and I'm going to put Jennifer in touch with you. Is that good?
Please. Jennifer? Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Please. I will connect Jennifer. Wonderful. Alison Arngrim, everybody, please check out her book. She's got her Alison Arngrim show every Tuesday, the radio show every day at 1:30. She's reading on Facebook, on Alison's Facebook page, and you're also on Cameo, if anybody, right?
I'm on Cameo. show, and I'm on a thing called Coach the World, which is similar to Cameo. You book a little Zoom call, like a little one-on-one, and Coach the World. And then I have a stageit.com show on December 17th, Nellie's Nasty Noel.
Ooh, I definitely want to watch that.
And then just visit us at protect.org, because we're doing like many different things.
Well, that's amazing work that you're doing. And I have all of that up on, this will live on YouTube on my page, and
Beautiful.
I'll have the links there.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. So great
Thank you.
to meet you. This was really fun. I'm glad I started watching. I'm part of the cult now. Have a great day.
One of us.
I am. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Locker Room. Thanks, Alison.
Thanks.